If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Kathryn Hansen, and my mission is to give you ideas and information that will help you let go of binging and other harmful habits surrounding food. I want to make recovery practical and accessible for everyone who wants to be free of this. The idea for this episode came to me earlier this month when I was driving, and on this particular day, my anxiety level was pretty high. And I happened to hear on the radio that April is Stress Awareness Month. My first thought was that I certainly don't need a month to make me aware of stress because, like many people, I'm definitely aware of stress every month, and it seems like every day. But then as I kept driving, I started thinking that it would be a good time to bring awareness about the anxiety and stress that exist in binge eaters and former binge eaters. Binge eating is highly correlated with anxiety. Some research shows that about 37% of people who are diagnosed with binge eating disorder are also diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. But most researchers agree that it's not a linear relationship in either direction, meaning that anxiety doesn't necessarily lead to binge eating, and binge eating doesn't necessarily lead to an anxiety problem. I said this in Brain Over Binge, but I believe that in my case, my anxiety was definitely a factor that set me up to diet in the first place and take that diet too far. I worried about my weight more than others, just like I worried about a lot of things in my life more than others. To alleviate my anxiety about weight, I tried to control it in ways that were unhealthy and problematic, and led to me putting my body in a calorie-deprived state that led to binge eating as a way my body was trying to survive. I think anxiety also contributed to me developing purging behaviors because I was so stressed about weight gain after my binges that I panicked and I felt like I needed to do something to try to compensate. And once this extremely unhealthy binge purge cycle was set in motion, it became a habit that took over my life and created so much more anxiety. And then in therapy, I was told that I had to reduce and manage my anxiety in order to stop binging, which really seemed impossible, so it all became very complicated. Coach Julie is here today to help me talk about the connection between anxiety and binge eating, and how you can avoid letting any issue with anxiety get in the way of ending the struggle with food. Hi, Julie. Welcome back.
Hi, Kathryn.
We're going to talk about a topic that's a pretty big topic. We're going to address anxiety today. Anxiety, stress, and how this is kind of connected in many multifaceted ways to eating disorders. And both of us kind of have our own unique experiences with anxiety, which we'll share a little bit of today. So I'm going to get started just by sharing a little bit of my own experience with anxiety. As most people who have read my books know, and even listen to this podcast, I tend to be an anxious person. It's something that definitely predated the eating disorder. I was always an anxious child. I'm 17 years beyond recovery at this point and still deal with anxious symptoms and things like that. I've definitely learned to manage it. It's been up and down at different times of my life, but it's definitely something that seems to be a more sticky part of my personality. And it's something that during the eating disorder, I was told, okay, this is one of the causes of your eating disorder. But here I am 17 years later, still kind of dealing with a lot of the anxiety, and food issues are just not a thing. So, part of this conversation will be to encourage you that having a tendency toward anxiety does not destine you to have issues with food. You can learn to kind of deal with both issues separately in a way, and there are connections between the two that we're going to talk about. But, I just want to encourage everyone out there that it does not mean that you're destined to keep binging forever if you're an anxious person. So what about you, Julie? I know that anxiety kind of has been a part of your story as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't know that I would say that I was an anxious kid, but I will say that I was bullied from a very young age, well into my adult life, actually. And that as that small child being bullied, I'm sure I felt anxious. I know I felt unsafe most of the time. and uncomfortable. I don't know that I had words for it. And I don't think people described me as anxious, but I know that inside I felt very unsafe. And I know that also from that time, I would turn to food to soothe. Again, not knowing that I was doing that. There was no like overt, like, oh, I feel afraid and oh, I'm turning to food to soothe. I was 11 years old, but I know that that was happening. Right. And then my brain somehow made that link that, oh, like when I'm stressed out, when I'm anxious, when I'm feeling afraid, if I eat, it numbs me out, right? It numbs me out in some way. And again, it was not overt. There was no conscious reasoning behind this because I was too little to have any of that sense. But there was some connection being made that just continued on into my adult life. And then as I got older, and my life circumstances were, more, what should I say? What's the word? More severe. I'm a parent. My late husband, when he was alive, diagnosed with cancer, whatever things came at me, obviously there was a lot of cause for anxiety, stress, overwhelm, fear, all of those very human emotions. But because my eating disorder brain was so active, I would eat, binge, whatever to compensate, which only exacerbated my anxiety, fear, overwhelm, panic, because in addition to the life circumstances going on, I was also engaging in this food behavior that from every angle I didn't want to be doing and was making me less resourced to manage whatever was going on in my life.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up that you did that since you were a child and it wasn't a conscious thing. And I think a lot of people get into it very unconsciously because it only makes sense that as humans, we feel bad. We have all these, maybe thoughts and feelings we can't explain. And you kind of notice when I'm doing something pleasurable, I don't think about that anymore. And food is kind of the easiest thing, especially for kids. But it's a pattern that can catch on. And for a lot of people, it's definitely not even a problem. But for some people, it does increase and turn into excessive overeating and binging and patterns that we don't want. And so that's really interesting. Another thing that stood out to me about your story is that you talked about a lot of your life circumstances being just really hard. And, you don't have to be a quote unquote anxious person or have this tendency to be hit with hard life circumstances that sort of make you into an anxious person. Like it's not you, it's the circumstances.
Yeah.
For me, it was more, I didn't have any really, really severe life circumstances. Definitely issues that have been really hard, but it hasn't been that major trauma, So for me, I feel like it is more of this trait. It's not necessarily, circumstances, even though there are hard circumstances. I can look at it objectively and be like, okay, there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of worse things, but either way that you're dealing with it, it's still, these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and physical symptoms of anxiety that can just be really hard to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, bringing it back to where you were starting, this idea that just because you have life circumstances doesn't ever mean that you're destined to binge or have an eating problem. Never. And also, if you have developed some kind of connection between eating to soothe the anxiety that comes with life or a heritage trait of anxiety, it doesn't mean that you're destined to continue binging forever because you made that connection. Both ends, right? And also one other piece that I want to say is to everyone out there who, from a very small age, maybe didn't feel safe or experienced some kind of trauma as I did, and then, made this very innocent choice to start eating in response to that for whatever reason. It's also remembering like we all do the best we can with what we have. And when we are small children, either getting put on diets as I was, or, responding to bullying as I was, like all of those things, we did the best we could with what we had. And as we get older, we can start to make new choices. And that's the amazing thing is it's never too late and we're never too far gone, as we've talked about before, and that we can decouple all of these patterns. And when we do, it's so much easier to manage whatever's being thrown at us in life or to live with anxious temperaments.
Yeah. Because I think back to when I did struggle with food and it only made everything so much worse.
Always and only. It always and only makes everything worse.
And it gave me more circumstances to be stressed about because I was stressed about how I felt after eating and the shame and the guilt. And then, of course, in therapy, as I talked about in my books, then that connection was made even stronger because the therapist said, okay, you must be doing this to soothe yourself from anxiety. I was like, but I lived with anxiety for so many years before and I didn't have to binge in response. And, but for me personally, I know everyone has a different story. It was that diet that set off the binges. And then it kind of got connected with other things in my life based on conditioning and based on just kind of solidifying these patterns. But then I realized, okay, it's not the anxiety, it's the urge to binge. Because even if I did have anxiety, that anxiety didn't automatically drive me toward the food. That urge comes in between the anxiety and the behavior. And I think it's the same for people who start off binging, let's say, who start off eating to soothe in response to anxiety. Still, once the pattern is developed, it's still that urge that drives the behavior.
Absolutely. It's always the urge, right? Whenever anybody's binging, it's because they're rewarding an urge. They're responding to it with food.
Yeah. And I think people who have these kind of longstanding patterns, I'd be interested to hear how you experience this in your coaching and with people in the group. But I think it can be harder for people to see that, okay, it is just the urge that is the problem. It's not that I have to solve everything. It's not that I have to solve all the anxiety. Like when you have those longstanding patterns of eating in response to anxiety, I think it can be easy to think, okay, I need to solve the anxiety in order to stop binging. But it is really about learning to respond differently to that urge.
Yes. And this is something I'm very excited to talk about because what I want to say is when you learn that you can have an urge and not act on it so that you can be with that feeling of an urge in your body, that feeling of over desire, it is not comfortable. It's not comfortable when you're having an urge and you don't act on it. And yet, not only is everything you want on the other side of that urge, so your peace, your integrity, your freedom, your ability to then do it again the next time, like all of that. But also you start to learn that you can feel any emotion and not respond to it. In other words, if you learn to allow an urge, the discomfort of an urge, then oh, I can be uncomfortable. I can be anxious and get on with life at the same time. Just as I can have an urge and continue on with my day without responding to it, I can wake up and have anxiety, which for me is something that happens almost daily now in my life. I wake up and anxiety is there and I can be with it. And as I like to say, you can ride with me, but you can't drive.
For sure. And then you're free to find things that help you in certain situations and different strategies that you can use that actually do help with your anxiety rather than just doing something like binging that makes everything worse.
Absolutely, for sure. When you don't turn to food, when you recognize that anxiety is here and there's nothing to fix, and food certainly isn't going to fix it anyway, but when you can be with it, then you're more resourced to find proper tools to either understand your anxiety and or alleviate it and sometimes make it go away altogether. Although for me, I kind of tend to just say I'm an anxious person at this point in my life. So I know that it's going to be there and that's okay. Anxiety's here and that's okay. That's what I say.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It reminds me of our acceptance podcast, which I'll link in the show description, about accepting thoughts, emotions, feelings. And it is so powerful. You're so right that when you can learn to experience that feeling of an urge and all those physical symptoms and thoughts and feelings and not act on it, you can do that with so many things in life. And that's definitely been super helpful for me as far as anxiety, like to recognize, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now and to go on with my day. And I feel like same with an urge. If you really try so hard to make it go away and this has to go away and what can I do to make this go away, it tends to make it worse. And I feel like it's similar with anxiety. Yes, there are things that help, but a lot of times really fighting to make it go away just makes it worse.
Yes, every time, resistance to anything exacerbates it. So pain times resistance equals suffering, right? You have the clean pain of feeling some anxiety. And then you add the extra arrows, as I call them. So, oh my God, why am I feeling this? This isn't right. Something's wrong with me. What am I going to do? I can't handle this, whatever you say. Or you add in binging, extra arrow, extra arrow, extra arrow. And all of a sudden you are really suffering. And it's the same thing. It's like you have an urge to binge, and then it's like, oh my God, why is this happening? What am I going to do? There's something wrong with my brain. I can't handle this. It's too hard. I'll start tomorrow. All those extra arrows. And then you're really suffering. And the urge has just gotten bigger and stronger and bigger and stronger. And same thing with the anxiety. The anxiety will just increase, 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 versus just putting your hands on your heart, as I start every group coaching call with, taking a nice deep breath, feeling into it. I'm feeling anxious, and that's okay. I'm feeling stressed, and that's okay. Life is kind of hard right now, and that's okay. One of my favorite expressions, right now, it's like this.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, especially now. I feel like, since the pandemic and there's so much going on in the world and economically, like a lot of people are just really struggling, and life feels hard, and there's nothing abnormal about you if you are experiencing anxiety right now. And you can accept that. And I want to say that with a little bit of a disclaimer here, because just to share a little bit personally, like I've had a few periods in my life where I've had almost like debilitating physical symptoms from it. And if that's the case, sometimes it is hard to then just go on with your day when there's such like debilitating physical symptoms. So,
Absolutely.
For some people, there may be some intervention you need. You may need to get medical help. There may be something that you need to look at there to get it to a point where you are able to just detach from it and allow it to be there. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, that's such an important and that very important point. And thank you for raising that, because also when I'm talking about this, I am absolutely not talking about clinical anxiety, clinical depression that might require the intervention of a psychiatrist or medication. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a very, very smart way to care for yourself during those periods. So if it feels debilitating in any way and it's creating physical symptoms, or it's impeding your ability to function in the world, to go to work, to take care of your normal responsibilities, then absolutely reach out and get whatever help is necessary.
Yeah, Julie, that's a really great point. And, as you work with people, you're our Brain Over Binge coach and you help people with eating issues, but you're also a life coach and you help people with many, many issues that come up in life. And yeah, sure, you're not qualified to help people with this debilitating anxiety, but you definitely help people with anxiety through coaching. And, how does coaching help with these kind of problems?
Great question. I mean, first of all, it helped me so much, right? Through my mindfulness training, and then also all the life coaching I received. I learned first and foremost how to be with discomfort, because discomfort is part of life, and it is our superpower to be able to be with any and all emotions. And so once again, I learned, I can have an urge and not act on it, and I don't get struck down by lightning. Nothing happens to me. And in fact, on the other side is everything that I want in life. Once I saw that I could do that, the world opened up for me, because the truth is the worst thing that can happen to me is an emotion. And so I know I can be with any emotion that arises. And then once I learned that, that's what I teach all of my clients. That's how we work together. It's all about being with discomfort. And so whether it's one-on-one coaching or group coaching or both, it's so powerful to see, I can be with anything that comes my way and let it move through me. And then I'm better resourced to handle what's coming at me.
Yeah, for sure. And it is such an amazing experience to have issues in life like anxiety, like feelings of sadness, loneliness, and to just not even think of food. I mean, sure, like you need to eat during the day, of course. And there are going to be times that you're eating when you're stressed just because you need nourishment type of thing. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that being said, like, it's so great to like never want to overdo it, to never have the desire. I mean, I talked about times that I've had debilitating anxiety and like not once did I think, a binge is going to help with that. It's so, so freeing. I can't even tell you how freeing it is to be able to deal with any issue in life and not even consider binging. And it's possible for anyone. You can break these habits and these connections and completely change your brain.
Absolutely. And it's that clean processing of emotion, because emotion, energy plus motion, it's meant to move through us. And when we shove food down, when we're feeling an emotion that's uncomfortable, we block our ability to let that emotion move through us. It becomes stuck energy, and then it gets worse. And so it's extremely powerful. It's the best feeling in the world to know that you can do that.
Yeah. This has been all really helpful. I feel like a lot of listeners can probably relate to us and our experiences and to everything you're talking about here. And do you have any final thoughts about anxiety as far as what people can do, like if they're kind of feeling overwhelmed and not sure where to start?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost is to remember you are not alone. All people experience anxiety and stress from time to time. And so it's that whole self-compassion piece of, I love the way Kristen Neff teaches it. And I do this with my clients. Like, this is suffering. Suffering is part of life. Other people feel this way too. May I be kind to myself right now, and just breathing through it. That's the first thing that I would say right away. Recognizing the universality of it is very, very comforting because other people feel this way too. Kathryn and I feel that way too, right? And also seeing, I can have anxiety and stress and not exacerbate it with food. That's great to know. It's possible to do that. So having hope that that's always available to you is really, really important.
Yeah, I love the universality of it all that you talked about, because it's so easy, I think, in today's world to scroll on social media and think that everyone else is perfect and not experiencing these feelings and thoughts. And you see everyone smiling faces and, they're not anxious. Well, you don't know what people are dealing with. So I think that's super comforting to know how many people are dealing with this, especially at this time.
That's right. And maybe to end on a little bit of a high note, just to put a positive spin on all of this, anxiety and stress, we can think about them as very uncomfortable and very difficult to be with, but there's also the piece of it that's very positive, because when we feel stress about something, when we feel anxiety about something, it means that we really care about this thing. It's a sign that we're doing something important, that it matters a lot to us. And I love that expression that fear, anxiety, stress is excitement without the breath. And so just remembering that it's just some excitement without the breath. And so what's the fix for that? Just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and remember, this is just something that's really, really important to me. That's why I feel so worked up. And if I breathe, I'm going to come back online, because, we talk a lot about anxiety, stress, overwhelm as us being offline, that our brains are kind of offline. Our amygdala is firing. And the way to bring our brains back online so that we're more in the prefrontal cortex is by breathing slowly and deeply.
That's amazing. I really love that. And I hope that it really helps you put anxiety into perspective, and you can, learn your own ways to deal with it, get coaching if you need it, and just know that you're not alone. So thank you so much, Julie, for being here. This has been great.
Oh, my pleasure, Kathryn. Thank you so much.
If you want to work with Julie on issues surrounding food as well as anxiety, you can schedule a one-on-one session, or you can join the Brain Over Binge group. And links to both of those options are in the show description. For the one-on-one session, you can schedule that at brainoverbinge.com/1, the word 1-on-1-coaching. Before your session, Julie does a detailed intake form so that she can get to know you and your unique challenges, and so she can understand how she can best help you during your session. For the group, you'll get live coaching from Julie on weekly group calls, and you can also get daily coaching from her on the forum. Plus, you'll get the support of all of the other amazing members. And you get access to the Brain Over Binge course and additional lessons and guided meditations from Julie. You can join anytime at brainoverbinge.com/group. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope that this conversation sparked some insights for you as far as dealing with anxiety and breaking the connection between states of stress and binge eating. I always want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the host of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.